They called her just a cleaning lady and laughed at her dreams. But they didn't know her power. Get ready for the unbelievable true story of how she took them all down. Herself. If you love stories that defy expectations, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the incredible journey that's about to unfold. Let's jump into the story. They laughed at the black cleaning lady until she fired the CEO herself. The polished brass of the elevator doors reflected the high-ceilinged lobby, a vast expanse of marble and muted hues designed to impress. For Mildred Johnson, though, the grandeur was lost in the tight knot of anxiety twisting in her stomach. Today wasn't just another day. It was her chance, the culmination of years of studying, late nights fueled by lukewarm coffee and unwavering belief in her own potential. She clutched the folder containing her resume, a testament to her hard work, the crisp paper a stark contrast to the worn edges of her own working-class life. Mildred had always been drawn to the sleek, modern architecture of Innovate Tech, the city's leading technology firm. It was more than just a job for her. It was a symbol of what she could achieve, a beacon of opportunity that had illuminated her dreams since she was a young girl, peering through the building's glass facade, imagining herself working among the bright minds within. She'd envisioned herself innovating, contributing, making a real difference. Now she was finally here, ready to prove that her vision was more than just a pipe dream. The interview room was sterile, all sharp angles and cold surfaces, much like the faces of the three individuals waiting for her. They were all white, all middle-aged, all exuding an aura of effortless privilege that made Mildred acutely aware of the invisible barriers she was up against. Richard Thompson, the CEO himself, sat at the head of the table, a man whose every gesture and word seemed to ooze self-importance. He was flanked by two HR representatives, their expressions a blend of polite interest and thinly veiled skepticism. "Ms. Johnson," Richard began, his tone condescendingly affable, "we've reviewed your application. Quite impressive on paper. You seem to have a lot of potential." He lingered on the word, a hint of doubt creeping into his voice. Mildred, though, was not one to be easily intimidated. She met his gaze head-on, her own calm demeanor a stark contrast to the simmering anger within. She proceeded to detail her qualifications, emphasizing her experience in project management, her expertise in data analysis, and her vision for using artificial intelligence to improve customer service. She spoke with conviction, highlighting her ability to see problems from a different angle, her eagerness to embrace innovation, and her dedication to delivering results. She described in detail a specific idea she had been developing, a sophisticated, AI-driven system that would personalize customer interactions and anticipate their needs, saving the company both time and resources. The panel listened, their expressions shifting from polite interest to something akin to surprise. Even Richard, initially dismissive, seemed to be taken aback by the sophistication of her thinking. She could feel the shift in the room's energy as the interview seemed to transform from a perfunctory process to a serious evaluation. When she finished, a hush fell over the room, and for a moment Mildred allowed herself a flicker of hope. Then Richard cleared his throat and broke the silence. "That's very impressive, Ms. Johnson. A lot to consider, certainly." He turned to one of the HR representatives. "What do you think?" The HR representative, a woman with a severe bob cut, looked at her notes before responding. "Yes, her ideas are certainly creative. However, we have to consider the overall fit." She paused, a thinly veiled implication hanging in the air. "Does she fit into our corporate culture?" Mildred understood. She knew her fit was the color of her skin, her background, the fact that she didn't come from the same privileged world as them. The room suddenly felt colder, and the hope that had been budding in her chest began to wither. The interview ended shortly after, with Richard promising to be in touch. As she was leaving, Mildred paused by the door, her keen ears picking up. A conversation between Richard and the HR reps. "What do you think?" Richard asked, his voice laced with a dismissive tone. "Impressive," one of the HR reps said. "But her background, it just doesn't seem right for the position we had in mind." "Exactly," Richard responded. "But that idea she mentioned about AI, it's actually quite good. It could really improve our customer engagement." "Perhaps we could use it for the upcoming project," the first HR rep said. "That new marketing campaign could use a fresh approach." Mildred's blood boiled. They were not only dismissing her, but were also planning to steal her idea and give credit to someone else. Her dream felt like it was being stomped on right in front of her. As they moved into a hushed conversation that seemed to ignore her very existence, she could feel her dream turn into a simmering anger. That evening, Mildred received a call. "Ms. Johnson." The voice on the other end, a clipped, professional tone that felt like an insult wrapped. "In politeness, we regret to inform you that you have not been selected for the project manager position." She had anticipated it, but the words still landed like a punch. "However," the voice continued, "we do have a cleaning position available. It's an entry-level position, but we feel you have a strong work ethic and that you might be suitable for it." The voice droned on. "We can pay you the standard rate, blah, blah, blah." Mildred couldn't believe it. They were offering her a cleaning position after dismissing her qualifications and expertise. But as the phone line buzzed with that final, dehumanizing "thank you for your time," she had a moment of clarity. She remembered a flashback of herself as a young girl standing in front of the tall, Innovate Tech building, full of admiration and dreams of being part of its inner circle. Her dream wasn't about a title, it was about making a difference. The seed of defiance was planted. "I'll take it," she said calmly, masking the burning fury behind her words. "I'll take the cleaning position." Mildred knew that she had to get inside. She had to find a way to make them see her for what she was, a force to be reckoned with. She decided that she would bide her time, she would observe and learn, and one day she would show them just how wrong they were. The hum of the vacuum cleaner became Mildred's morning soundtrack, a stark contrast to the energetic bustle of the Innovate Tech office that always started promptly at 9 a.m. Instead of brainstorming sessions and strategy meetings, her days were now filled with the mundane tasks of emptying trash bins, polishing desks, and mopping floors. It was a job that felt beneath her, a constant reminder of the injustice she had endured. Yet as she navigated through the maze of cubicles and executive suites, she did so with a purpose that went far beyond the simple act of cleaning. She became an observer, her movements meticulous, her ears attuned to the whispers and hushed conversations that echoed through the office. She wasn't just sweeping floors, she was collecting data. She paid attention to the way Richard spoke to his staff, the dismissive tone he used when interacting with anyone below his station. She listened to the casual chatter among the executives, their conversations often laced with arrogance and a sense of entitlement. She studied the flow of paperwork, the patterns of traffic in and out of offices, and she memorized the security protocols. The arrogance of those around her was a constant irritant, but she channeled it, using it as fuel for her growing determination. It was the casual dismissal of her contributions in the interviews and the subsequent use of her idea that stung the most. Mildred watched as the marketing campaign that Richard had championed, using her AI concept, went into development with a budget that seemed exorbitant to her. She realized that the success of this project was a direct result of her ideas, yet she wasn't given any credit, and her application was tossed aside like yesterday's trash. It was like a personal challenge being thrown in her face. She was determined to make them understand that they had made a big mistake in underestimating her. But her focus shifted when she noticed Richard's behavior around the quarterly financial reports. The way he would lock himself in his office for hours, the late-night meetings with his financial team, the guarded way he spoke on the phone, it all suggested something was amiss. She started spending more time in the areas surrounding his office, cleaning the spaces outside his door, making a mental note of the codes he used to enter. She'd even feign a loose button on her uniform to get close to the trash cans outside, catching a glimpse of discarded papers with numbers that looked out of place. The numbers didn't make sense to her immediately, but they did signal that something was not right. It was the first sign of the intricate web of deception that Richard was weaving. Mildred began to use the time during her breaks to learn more about corporate finance. She frequented the library downtown, devouring books on accounting, investment, and market manipulation. She learned about how to manipulate stock prices, how to create shell companies, and how to hide illegal profits in complex transactions. She wasn't just learning the theory, she was studying Richard's actions and connecting the dots. It was as though she was building a puzzle, each new piece of information bringing the larger picture into sharper focus. One evening, as she was cleaning the conference room, Mildred overheard a conversation between Richard and his CFO, an obsequious man named Peterson. They were talking about a deal involving the sale of company assets, but the numbers didn't add up. Richard's voice, usually so confident and arrogant, was now laced with a nervous edge. "We need to move the money through the offshore account before the auditors start asking too many questions," Richard said, his tone urgent. "But what if they discover the shell company?" Peterson replied, his voice trembling. "They won't," Richard retorted confidently. "It's too complicated. We used a bunch of loopholes." Mildred froze, her hand hovering over the wastebasket. She felt a chill run down her spine, and the conversation confirmed her suspicions. This wasn't just a case of bad management. It was an act of calculated fraud. She was aware that they had used the term offshore in their discussions, and she understood this to be a red flag in the finance world, as these companies and accounts were typically used to move funds illegally and anonymously. The numbers she had seen in Richard's garbage were now beginning to make sense. She carefully finished her cleaning task and then, on a whim, took a risk. She decided to take another trip to the library, specifically researching how whistleblowers bring companies to justice. She learned about the SEC and how it investigated these kinds of crimes. She also learned about the risks that came with whistleblowing and how it could affect people's lives, whether it was the financial risks or even physical risks. Mildred decided she would start documenting everything so that she would have irrefutable proof of Richard's misconduct. The following evening, Mildred noticed Richard locking himself into his office after everyone had left. She feigned a tripped wire on the vacuum cleaner, then moved to clean around his office. As she cleaned near his door, she subtly took a picture of the keypad code on his door with her phone and made a mental note of the number combination. She knew this would be the access that she needed to uncover all of his nefarious activities. As she cleaned the glass window of his office, she saw him furiously typing on his computer, and then he spoke out loud to himself. "We're going to make millions," he chuckled to himself. Later that night, she decided to test the code to Richard's office, and her heart beat in her chest. The door clicked open, and she slipped inside. With trembling hands, she plugged in a small USB drive into his computer, quickly transferring all of the files she could. She had been carefully curating this drive for the past few weeks, and was ready to transfer everything. Her hope was that these files would give her irrefutable proof of Richard's crimes. She found a spreadsheet that clearly laid out Richard's plan to manipulate the company's stock price. Another file contained invoices for fake services provided by shell companies. There were emails detailing how he transferred millions of dollars into a secret bank account in the Cayman Islands. She was beginning to see the whole picture of Richard's scheme, and as she gathered the data, a mixture of anger and determination filled her. That night, she stayed up late reviewing everything, printing out the important documents and filling a file folder with all of her evidence. She carefully labeled it as Exhibit A. She had been careful in her planning. Her work wasn't just about exposing Richard. It was also about making sure they paid for their crimes. Her plan was becoming more and more clear in her head. Mildred wasn't just going to clean this mess up. She was going to make sure that those who made the mess were held accountable. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the Innovate Tech office, a stark contrast to the shadowy secrets Mildred was now privy to. The weight of her discovery, the intricate web of deceit woven by Richard, settled heavily on her shoulders. She knew she couldn't confront him alone. She needed someone trustworthy, someone within the company who shared her sense of justice and moral compass. And so, she turned her focus to Sarah Miller, a mid-level manager in the marketing department, a woman who had, on several occasions, offered Mildred a kind smile or a moment of genuine conversation. Sarah, a woman in her late 30s, was known for her sharp intellect and her dedication to her work. However, unlike the other executives, she wasn't driven by power or ego. She seemed to genuinely care about the company and its employees. Mildred had noticed that she often seemed troubled, as if she were grappling with some internal conflict. She also noticed that Sarah seemed to treat her with a degree of respect, unlike the other executives who tended to look through her as if she were invisible. It was that sense of genuine human decency that made Mildred think Sarah might be her ally. Mildred decided to take a risk. She began subtly observing Sarah, paying close attention to her habits and routines. She noticed that Sarah always took her lunch break in a quiet corner of the cafeteria where she would read a book or sketch in a notebook. One day, Mildred feigned a spill near Sarah's table, using the opportunity to engage her in conversation. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Mildred said, dabbing at the floor with a rag. "I'm so clumsy sometimes." Sarah looked up from her book, a gentle smile forming on her face. "Don't worry about it," she said. "Accidents happen." As Mildred cleaned the spill, she steered the conversation towards the company, subtly mentioning the strange behaviors she had noticed lately. "I see a lot of things working late," Mildred stated, her tone casual. "It seems like everyone is so busy." Sarah sighed. "It's been crazy lately," she said, her gaze drifting to the floor. "I feel like there's a lot happening behind the scenes that we're not privy to." Mildred seized the opportunity to push a little further. "It can be hard to see the truth when you're stuck in the middle," she said, her voice soft and calm. "Sometimes you need a different perspective to see things clearly." Sarah looked up at her, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "You seem to know a lot about what's going on here," she said, her voice tinged with a hint of suspicion. Mildred decided to reveal just a part of her hand. "I see things others don't," she said cryptically, avoiding making eye contact. "I am, after all, the one who cleans up after everyone." Mildred's answer seemed to strike a chord with Sarah, and she was intrigued. The following week, Mildred and Sarah had several similar conversations, where Mildred would drop cryptic hints about Richard's behavior, and Sarah would follow along with veiled accusations and innuendo. These moments were enough to plant a seed of doubt in Sarah's mind, and she started paying closer attention to what was going on around her. One afternoon, Mildred left a folder on Sarah's desk, a collection of notes and observations about Richard's activities. It was the information she had collected in those few weeks she had been secretly observing the office. Sarah flipped through the pages, her eyes widening as she absorbed the information. The next day, Sarah sought Mildred out during her lunch break. They sat together in a corner of the cafeteria, their voices hushed as they talked. Sarah seemed both disturbed and intrigued by Mildred's findings. Sarah had noticed things had felt wrong for a while now, but the facts and figures in the folder had made it clear how bad things were. This is terrible, Sarah said, her voice trembling. But are you sure this is real? We can't just go around making these kinds of accusations. I am sure, Mildred said, her voice firm, and I have more proof. She then revealed the files she had downloaded from Richard's computer, laying them out on the table. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief as she flipped through them. This is beyond anything I could have imagined, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. What are you planning to do? I don't know yet, Mildred admitted, but we can't just stand by and let him get away with this. He's ruining the company and he's hurting everyone. A long silence hung in the air as they sat there, mulling over the gravity of their situation. Sarah had always been a stickler for rules, so it went against her nature to go against her superiors. However, she had always known that Richard was a bad person. She had also heard rumors of the ways in which he had treated other employees, including women, and she felt that it was her duty as a human being to expose him and his crimes. And no, it's a risk, Mildred continued, breaking the silence. But I can't do this alone. I need someone on the inside, someone who can help me navigate the system. I need someone who can see the truth. Sarah looked at Mildred, her expression a mix of fear and resolve. She was, on one hand, very scared of the risks involved in taking on a powerful CEO like Richard. But on the other hand, she felt like she had finally found the courage to do what was right. I'm in, Sarah finally said, her voice firm and unwavering. I can't just keep watching and saying nothing. I want to be a part of the solution, but we have to be careful. That day, an unlikely alliance was formed, a partnership born out of a shared desire for justice and a determination to expose the truth. It was clear that Mildred was the one who had the ability to plan and execute the takedown, and that Sarah was the one who had the inside track into the company. Her ability to speak up and her knowledge of the day-to-day functions of the office being invaluable. Mildred and Sarah were polar opposites, but together they were a force to be reckoned with. As they made plans for the future, Mildred could feel a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. She was no longer alone, with Sarah's allegiance secured. Mildred's quiet rebellion began to transform into a more focused, strategic operation. The cleaning cart was no longer just a vehicle for moving from room to room. It had become her mobile command center, a place where she planned her next move and studied the financial documents she'd managed to acquire. The office, once a place of oppression, was now a laboratory, a space where she could analyze and learn, ready to move with a speed and agility that no one saw coming. But as Mildred moved through the halls, she realized that her expertise was lacking in some areas. She knew how to expose Richard, but she still needed a larger plan for how to actually fix what was wrong with Innovate Tech. She needed more information about the intricacies of corporate finance and how to steer a business to success. This was when the old man, Mr. Howard, started to show a larger interest in Mildred. Mildred had noticed Mr. Howard several times in the past weeks. He always seemed to show up during the evening when she was cleaning the offices. He always wore a sharp suit and carried a leather briefcase, and he always seemed to be watching her with a knowing look in his eyes. One evening, as Mildred was emptying the trash cans in the lobby, Mr. Howard approached her. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice raspy with age. "I couldn't help but notice that you seem to be very thorough in your work." Mildred looked at him, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Just doing my job, sir," she replied, her tone guarded. Mr. Howard chuckled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "A job done with dedication is more than just a job," he said, his voice soft and warm. "It shows character and a desire to be the best, and I've always admired that." Mildred was taken aback. She didn't expect a comment like that from a man like him. "Thank you, sir," she said. "I appreciate that." "I see you here often," Mr. Howard said. "Working late like I do. Mind if I keep you company?" He gestured towards a nearby seating area. Mildred hesitated for a moment, then nodded. As they settled into the chairs, Mr. Howard began to ask Mildred about her work, her background, her dreams. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers, and he seemed to pick up on every nuance of what she said. It felt like she was talking to a wise old soul, someone who had seen the world and understood its complexities. Over the next few weeks, these encounters became a routine. Mildred found herself sharing her thoughts and feelings with Mr. Howard, telling him about her frustrations with the company, her desire for change, and her growing understanding of Richard's deceit. She told him about her past, her dreams, of working at Innovate Tech, and her disappointment after the interview. To her surprise, Mr. Howard listened intently, his eyes filled with concern and understanding. "It seems to me," Mr. Howard said one evening, "that you know more about this company than anyone else who works here. You have an eye for detail, a mind for strategy, and a heart for doing what's right." "I just wish I knew more," Mildred replied. "I know how to take him down, but I need to learn how to build the company back up again." "Well, maybe I can help you with that," Mr. Howard said, a sly grin forming on his face. "You see, I have been in the business world for a very long time." He revealed that he had been a successful investor for many years, and he had a keen eye for the way that companies work. From that day forward, Mr. Howard became Mildred's mentor, a silent partner who helped her navigate the treacherous world of corporate finance. He would meet her every evening after everyone had gone home. He taught her about balance sheets, income statements, and cash flow projections. He explained how to analyze market trends, identify potential investments, and negotiate favorable deals. He didn't just teach her the theory, he taught her the practical aspects of running a successful company. "You need to know your enemy," Mr. Howard had stated one night as they pored over documents. "But you need to know yourself better. And you need to know how to use the system to win and not just to tear it down." While she absorbed Mr. Howard's teachings, Mildred was also putting into practice everything she was learning. She decided to take some of her savings, and with Mr. Howard's guidance, she started to invest in some small startups, ones that Richard had ignored, thinking them to be too risky. Mildred identified the potential of these companies using all of the skills she had learned, and when the market realized how valuable they were, Mildred made a substantial return on her investment. As Mildred's knowledge grew, Richard became more and more suspicious. He noticed her always being around and was always trying to find ways to make her disappear. Mildred continued her ruse, acting as the simple and humble cleaning woman. As far as he knew, she was just a simpleton, always smiling and saying, "Good morning." Little did Richard know she was, in fact, his biggest threat. As the days turned into weeks, Mildred felt a newfound sense of confidence. She was no longer just a cleaning lady. She was becoming a force to be reckoned with, a woman who understood the complexities of the business world, a woman who had a clear vision of the future and the determination to make it a reality. With the support of her new mentor, she was ready to take on anything. She was armed with the knowledge and the determination to take Richard down and rebuild the company from the ashes. Mildred felt like she had found a new family in Sarah and Mr. Howard, and she knew that together they could make this happen. The once sterile hallways of Innovate Tech now felt like a chessboard to Mildred, each move carefully considered, each interaction a calculated maneuver. With her newfound knowledge and Mr. Howard's guidance, she was no longer just reacting to Richard's actions. She was actively shaping the game, pushing him towards the edge of his own carefully constructed world. The cleaning supplies were now a subtle disguise, allowing her to move freely. An unseen observer, her mind always several steps ahead. Mildred had established a shell company, Sunrise Ventures, a business created from thin air. using her savings and seed money from Mr. Howard. This new company was nothing more than a legal entity, but it was Mildred's vehicle for investing in those smaller companies and for slowly buying up Innovate Tech stock. This new company was her way of working from behind the scenes, disrupting Richard's plans while he remained completely oblivious to her influence. The irony was not lost on her. She had started with nothing but the ability to sweep floors, but she was now a formidable force in the corporate world. As Sunrise Ventures grew, it attracted the attention of other investors, some of whom were previous associates of Richard. Mildred, with Mr. Howard's guidance, began to quietly meet with these investors, presenting them with her unique vision and a perspective that challenged the status quo. She would meet them at a small coffee shop that no one ever went to, and she would carefully craft her message to be one of empowerment and the need for ethical business. She never revealed her identity, and she made sure that each of her moves was calculated and precise. Richard, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly agitated. He could feel the ground shifting beneath his feet, sensing a growing resistance to his leadership. He had noticed some of his old associates seemed to be suddenly ignoring him, and his calls were going unanswered. He also saw the numbers in the stock market dropping, and that his company was losing money on some of the projects that he was sure would make money. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something was definitely wrong. His paranoia intensified when he started receiving anonymous emails, revealing some of his less than ethical practices. The emails came from different, encrypted sources, and it seemed like someone knew exactly what he was doing. He started suspecting everyone around him, turning his inner circle of confidants into a group of people that he could no longer trust. He summoned Peterson, his CFO, into his office, his face contorted with anger and suspicion. "Who else knows about the offshore accounts?" he demanded. Peterson's face turned pale, his voice trembling. "No one, sir. No one else knows about that." "Don't lie to me, Peterson." "You know that I'll find out the truth," Richard yelled. "I swear, sir," Peterson stuttered. "I have no idea what's going on, and I certainly have not told anyone." Richard wasn't convinced. He had always seen Peterson as a groveling sycophant, but now he was starting to think that he was working against him. "Then who is it, Peterson? Who is trying to sabotage me?" Richard screamed. Peterson simply shook his head. "I have no idea, sir." The truth was that Peterson was just as confused as Richard was. He had no idea how someone found out about the offshore account, and he was starting to become more and more afraid of Richard's increasingly erratic behavior. The once arrogant CEO was starting to unravel, and Peterson knew that it was only a matter of time before Richard was done. The more Richard investigated, the more paranoid he became. He hired private investigators, he scrutinized the company's security records, and he ordered background checks on everyone, but still he found nothing. He could not figure out where the leak was coming from, and he couldn't figure out how to get back on track. The once invincible CEO was now a man on the verge of collapse. Mildred, on the other hand, was thriving. Her new company was growing at an exponential rate, and she had the confidence and expertise to outmaneuver Richard at every turn. She was playing a game of chess, and Richard was nothing more than a pawn. She met with Sarah often, sharing information and making plans for the future. Sarah was also doing her part by gathering information from within the company, identifying Richard's weaknesses and providing Mildred with a strategic advantage. They were becoming closer than ever before, their shared mission creating a bond of trust and loyalty. They used coded language on the phone and would meet for lunch in unlikely spots in the city. They even had a secret signal that they would use if one of them felt like they were being watched. One evening, Mildred and Mr. Howard sat in their usual spot at the library, carefully reviewing Sunrise Ventures' financial statements. "You're "Doing a remarkable job, Mildred," Mr. Howard said, a note of pride in his voice. "You have a natural talent for this. You see opportunities where others see only risks. I have never seen anyone like you. I am only able to do this because of you and Sarah, Mr. Howard," Mildred responded humbly. "I have learned more in the past few weeks than I have in my entire life. Thank you." "You've learned well, Mildred," Mr. Howard chuckled. "Now it's time to move to the next phase of the plan." Mildred felt a surge of excitement. The underground competition had reached its peak. It was time to take the game to the next level. She knew that Richard was becoming desperate and unpredictable, and she was ready to put her plan into action. The cleaning lady had become a powerful adversary, and Richard was completely unaware of the storm that was coming. The city's annual tech conference was a lavish affair, a glittering spectacle of innovation and ambition. For Richard Thompson, it was an opportunity to showcase his company's success, to bask in the glow of public admiration. For Mildred Johnson, it was the perfect stage to unveil her true identity, to reveal the truth behind Richard's carefully constructed facade. The ballroom buzzed with the chatter of investors, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders, oblivious to the silent battle that was about to unfold. Richard, dressed in a bespoke suit, moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and offering platitudes. His smile, once genuine, now seemed strained, his eyes darting nervously around the room, as if he were expecting someone or something to jump out and expose him at any moment. Mildred, on the other hand, had made her entrance with a quiet confidence, a stark contrast to her usual humble demeanor. She was dressed in an elegant dress, her hair pulled back into a sleek bun, and her presence commanded respect, even from those who had previously dismissed her. Mildred had arrived with Mr. Howard, who had introduced her as a prominent investor in Sunrise Ventures, and she began to interact with many of Richard's colleagues and competitors. Richard, on the other hand, was growing increasingly agitated as he observed her interactions. It was clear that Mildred was making a great impression on the crowd, and this infuriated Richard to no end. As the evening progressed, Richard found himself drawn to Mildred, his curiosity piqued by her presence and confidence. He approached her with a forced smile, determined to assert his dominance. "Well, well," Richard said, his voice laced with a condescending tone. "If it isn't the cleaning lady, I must say you look quite different out of uniform." Mildred's eyes met his, her face devoid of any emotion. "I do," she responded, calmly. "And I think you look rather uncomfortable. It must be nerve-wracking to know that your reputation is on the brink of collapse." Richard's face flushed with anger. "What do you mean by that?" he said through gritted teeth. "It's obvious, isn't it?" Mildred replied smoothly. "You've spent so much time pretending to be someone you're not that you've forgotten how to be yourself. And now, when you see someone who has worked their way up, you can't help but be intimidated." "Who do you think you are?" Richard snapped. "You are nothing but a cleaning lady. You don't belong here." He let out a haughty chuckle, trying to regain his composure. Mildred paused, then addressed the crowd, her voice clear and resonant, silencing the room with her words. "I am a woman who was denied an opportunity, but I did not let that define me. I am a woman who had her ideas stolen from her, but I turned that anger into power. I am a woman who was underestimated, and I am a woman who is standing here today, ready to change the world." A hush fell over the room as everyone listened intently to her words. Richard was stunned, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. He had expected Mildred to shrink in fear, to cower in shame, but she stood tall and defiant, her voice echoing with confidence and power. "I see many of you here tonight," Mildred continued, "seeking inspiration and innovation, and yet you ignore the talent right under your nose. You overlook the potential in those who may not fit your preconceived notions, and I am here to tell you that it is time to change. It is time to look beyond the surface and see the true value that each person brings. And who are you to... "And tell us this," Richard interrupted, his voice trembling with anger. Mildred smiled, a knowing expression on her face. "I am the woman you denied a job to, the one you called just a cleaning lady. I am the woman whose ideas you stole and the woman who you tried to suppress. And I am also the woman who is going to take you down." Richard's face turned ashen, and he was at a complete loss for words. Mildred's words were a clear threat, and he knew that her carefully constructed house of cards was about to crumble. The crowd was stunned, a mixture of shock and intrigue on their faces. They had never seen anyone challenge Richard like this before. Mildred, now with the attention of the entire room, continued her story, describing her experience as a young girl dreaming of working in the tech world and the disappointment of being turned down. She spoke about the power of the human spirit and the importance of never giving up. Her voice was filled with emotion, and she spoke with such sincerity that the crowd couldn't help but be moved. That evening, the mask had fallen, the carefully constructed facade of Richard's empire was starting to crumble, and Mildred had shown everyone that there was a new force to be reckoned with. Her actions were a call to action, a challenge to the status quo, and a promise that things would never be the same. Mildred knew that this was just the beginning, but she felt confident that she was finally on the right path. The aftermath of Mildred's revelation at the tech conference was a whirlwind of speculation and unease. Richard, reeling from the public humiliation, retreated to his office, his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble around him. The whispers and rumors spread like wildfire, and the once unquestioning loyalty of his inner circle began to waver. Mildred, on the other hand, had become an overnight sensation, an inspiration to those who had felt marginalized and overlooked, her story resonating with those who had always felt like underdogs. Mildred, along with Sarah and Mr. Howard, used the chaos and uncertainty to their advantage, carefully orchestrating their next move. She knew that exposing Richard was just the first step. She needed to dismantle his empire from the inside out, and this would require a calculated and methodical approach. Mr. Howard, with his contacts in the investment world, began to quietly buy up more shares of Innovate Tech's stock, further tightening the noose around Richard's neck. They called their operation Project Phoenix, a name that symbolized their intent to rebuild the company from the ashes. Meanwhile, Richard was becoming increasingly desperate, his paranoia reaching a fever pitch. He summoned his CFO Peterson to his office, his eyes bloodshot and his voice trembling with anger. "Who is she?" Richard demanded, slamming his fist on the table. "Who is that woman, and how did she know all of that information about me?" Peterson, who was already shaken by the events of the conference, could only stammer, I don't know, sir. I have no idea who she is, and I don't know what she is planning. But things look very bad." Richard began to shout, his anger bubbling to the surface. "I know she is behind this. I know someone is out to destroy me." He grabbed Peterson by the collar, pushing him up against the wall. "You are going to tell me who she is, or so help me." Peterson began to cry, terrified by Richard's outburst. "I swear, sir, I don't know what is going on." He had never seen Richard in such a rage, and he was finally realizing how dangerous this man truly was. Richard released him, then paced around the room, his mind racing. "She cannot be allowed to destroy everything that I have built." He realized that the only way out was to find out who this woman was and take care of her once and for all. Richard was determined to find out Mildred's true identity. He began to investigate everything about Sunrise Ventures, but the more he dug, the more he was met with dead ends. The company was a legal entity, but all of the information was obscured and untraceable. He realized he was up against someone who was more powerful and more cunning than he had ever imagined. Mildred, meanwhile, was focused on solidifying her position in the company. She had begun attending board meetings, using her newfound influence to challenge Richard's decisions. She would point out flaws in his financial reports, question his marketing strategies, and express concerns about his treatment of employees. The members of the board were starting to question Richard's leadership, and they had begun to listen to Mildred more and more often, because they felt she spoke with reason and her ideas were solid. One day, Mildred decided to take a bold step. She called a special meeting of the board, requesting that Richard be removed as CEO and replaced with a person with a different philosophy of business. She had enough stock now to make the change, so the decision was really hers to make. "I believe it is time for a change," Mildred stated, her voice firm and unwavering. "I believe that our company is in desperate need of new leadership, a leader who will bring honesty and integrity back into the fold. Richard has proven that he is not capable of handling this responsibility. He has taken our company to the brink of destruction, and it is time that we make changes." Richard scoffed. "You have no right to say such things. I am the CEO, and I will not go anywhere." He slammed his fist on the table. "You are no longer the CEO, Richard," Mildred said, her voice calm and confident. "I have enough stock now to fire you, and all you can do now is accept it." Richard's face went white. He realized, for the first time, that Mildred had outmaneuvered him completely. He looked around the room at the other members of the board, hoping that someone would side with him, but they all looked away, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and uncertainty. They all knew he was a fraud, and they all knew that Mildred was the only one who could save them. "I never thought that a cleaning lady could do this," Richard muttered under his breath. Mildred replied, "You have made a big mistake underestimating me, Richard. You have always valued people based on their titles and your own superficial measures, but it is time you learned that people have true value, and I promise that you will never forget this lesson." The room fell silent as the reality of the situation sank in. The tables had been turned, and Richard, once the powerful CEO, was now at the mercy of the woman he had so callously dismissed. Mildred had played her hand perfectly, leaving Richard with no choice but to accept defeat. For the first time in a long time, Mildred felt like she was in control. She knew that there was still work to be done, but for now she had won. And now her real work was about to begin. The boardroom, once a symbol of Richard Thompson's power, was now a stage for his downfall. Mildred, sitting at the head of the table, exuded an aura of quiet authority, her presence commanding respect and attention. The members of the board, once intimidated by Richard, now watched Mildred with a mix of awe and anticipation, their loyalty shifting towards the woman who had exposed the truth and promised a brighter future. Richard sat at the far end of the table, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. The confidence he had always projected had vanished, replaced by a desperate fear that was visible to everyone. He knew that his time was up, and he was doing his best to keep his composure, but it was clear that he was a broken man. Mildred began the meeting, her voice calm and resolute. "Today marks a new beginning for Innovate Tech," she said, her eyes scanning the faces of the board members. "We have all witnessed the deceit and corruption that has plagued this company, and it is time that we take back control of our future." She then proceeded to lay out the evidence she had collected over the past few months, the files she had downloaded from Richard's computer, the financial reports that revealed his fraudulent schemes, the testimonials from employees who had suffered from his abuse of power. All were presented with clarity and precision, leaving no room for doubt. These files and documents reveal a systematic pattern of deceit, greed, and corruption. They paint a picture of a man who has betrayed the trust that we have all placed in him. It's clear that Mr. Thompson has been using his position for his own personal gain, and that he has no regard for the well-being of our company and its employees. He has broken his fiduciary duty to this company, and he has used his power to demean and destroy people. Mildred paused for a moment, taking a breath, her gaze lingering on Richard. Richard, finally unable to contain himself, burst into a tirade, his words laced with bitterness and resentment. "This is a witch hunt," he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "You are all being manipulated by this cleaning lady. She has concocted this whole thing as a way to destroy me. Don't you all see she's a manipulative liar?" The board members looked at each other, their faces filled with disgust and disappointment. Richard's outburst only served to confirm their suspicions. They had all given him their loyalty and trust, and he had betrayed them all. Mildred, on the other hand, remained calm and collected, her composure in stark contrast to Richard's anger. "I was never lying to anyone," Mildred stated simply. "I have always been upfront about everything, and my only intention was to bring justice to our company. I have no desire for revenge. I just want what is right." She then presented a motion to remove Richard Thompson as CEO, effective immediately, and a proposal to install a new interim management team to ensure the stability of the company. The vote was unanimous. All of the members of the board voted in favor of the measure. They had finally seen the truth, and they had all decided to do what was right. "It is over, Richard," Mildred said, her voice soft but firm. "Your time here is done. You're no longer the CEO of Innovate Tech, and you will no longer have any power over any of us." Richard, finally realizing that he was defeated, slumped back in his chair, his face pale and defeated. He was a broken man, his empire having crumbled around him. He had lost everything, his position, his wealth, his reputation, and his power. He had become nothing. Mildred then turned to address the board once more. "We need to find a CEO who shares the values of integrity and honesty. For now, I will take the role of interim CEO. I hope you can trust that I will lead this company forward with diligence and respect. We will work to ensure that Innovate Tech is a company that we can all be proud of." The board members, relieved that their nightmare was over, applauded Mildred, their faces filled with hope and gratitude. They had finally found a leader they could trust, a woman of unwavering integrity and vision. They had finally learned their lesson, and they were all ready to move on from the past and look towards a brighter future. Richard was escorted out of the building by security. His head hung low, his face contorted with shame and humiliation. The other employees watched as he walked by, and although many of them were fearful of his presence, they all knew that they were now free. It was a day of celebration, a day that marked the end of a dark chapter in the history of Innovate Tech, and the beginning of a new era of hope and progress. Mildred watched as Richard disappeared from sight. She had accomplished what she had set out to do, and now the real work was about to begin. She had fired a corrupt CEO, and now she was going to use her knowledge and expertise to rebuild the company from the ashes. She had been a cleaning lady, but now she was a leader, and she was ready to take on the world. The immediate aftermath of Richard Thompson's dramatic exit was a period of both relief and uncertainty at Innovate Tech. The oppressive atmosphere that had permeated the company for so long had lifted, replaced by a cautious optimism, a feeling that perhaps things could finally be different. Mildred, now serving as the interim CEO, understood that her real work had just begun. She knew that she needed to not only dismantle the old regime, but to build a new foundation based on ethics, innovation, and a sense of shared purpose. Her first priority was to restore trust within the company. She held a series of town hall meetings, inviting all employees to share their concerns, their ideas, and their hopes for the future. She listened intently to their stories, their frustrations, their grievances, and she committed herself to addressing each and every issue. She spoke with sincerity and passion, emphasizing her belief in their potential and her commitment to creating a workplace where everyone was valued and respected. "We must not forget the lessons that we have learned," Mildred said in one of her meetings, her voice echoing through the room. "We have been victims of a culture of greed and deception, but we must not allow that to define us. We are capable of so much more, and we can build a better future together." She was surprised at the response. Many of the people in the company had been there for so long and had never felt respected or heard. They had lost their motivation and were simply going through the motions every day. But by listening to them, Mildred began to see their true potential, and she began to formulate a plan that would allow them to grow and prosper. Mildred began implementing sweeping changes to the company's policies and procedures. She established a new code of conduct, emphasizing honesty, integrity, and transparency. She created a system of checks and balances to ensure that no individual could abuse their power or exploit their position. She implemented a whistleblower program, encouraging employees to report any unethical behavior without fear of retaliation. She wanted to make sure that all of the corruption and the nastiness of the Richard era would be eliminated forever. She also implemented a new bonus program, rewarding those employees who showed initiative and dedication to their work, not simply those who brown-nosed their way to the top. She wanted to create a fair system where people were rewarded based on their merit, not based on their social connections. The most significant change she made was to reorganize the entire company. She decided to create smaller teams, allowing for more collaboration and creativity. She wanted to create a space where everyone felt like they could contribute their ideas and their unique points of view. She met with each of the team leaders, making sure that they understood her vision and her commitment to change. She faced some resistance from some of the more entrenched employees, those who were used to the old ways of doing business. They were resistant to her new ideas, and they were hesitant to embrace the changes that she was making. They had become comfortable in their ways, and the thought of change filled them with dread. Mildred understood their hesitancy, but she was not going to back down, as she knew that the only way to ensure the success of the company was to force them to change. Mildred began working with each of the resistant employees individually, using her own life experience to help them see why change was necessary. She would share her own story of perseverance and transformation, and she would encourage them to see that they also had the potential to do great things. She would work long hours, often staying late in the evenings to help these people understand her perspective, and she would do it all with a smile on her face. She also focused on innovation. Mildred created new research and development programs, inviting the employees to participate in the creation of new products and new services, and she encouraged everyone to use their unique talents to make the company a better place. She encouraged employees to challenge the status quo, to think outside of the box, and to embrace new ideas. As the weeks passed, Mildred's efforts began to bear fruit. The initial resistance started to fade away, replaced by a sense of unity and shared purpose. The employees, who had once felt disengaged and undervalued, now began to feel empowered and motivated, and they all came together to help push the company forward. They began to trust Mildred's vision, and they began to understand her passion and her commitment to creating a better world. The changes she was making were not just on paper. They were creating a culture of integrity, honesty, innovation, and teamwork. The employees started to feel proud of their work again, and they were excited to come to work each and every day. The office was finally a place of positivity and hope, a place where everyone felt included. Mildred also decided to change the mission of the company. from one that was strictly focused on profits to one that focused on improving the world and helping to solve some of society's most complex problems. She believed that businesses had a responsibility to use their power and resources to make the world a better place, not just a place for making money. Mildred, observing the changes that she had created, felt a sense of immense satisfaction. She had not only torn down a corrupt regime, but had built a new foundation, one that she could be proud of, and one that would leave a legacy for years to come. Mildred, the former cleaning lady, was now the leader that the company had been waiting for, and she knew that the best was still yet to come. Years had passed since Mildred Johnson had taken the helm at Innovate Tech. The once troubled company, teetering on the brink of collapse, had been transformed into a beacon of innovation, ethical leadership, and social responsibility. The changes that Mildred had implemented were not just cosmetic. They had permeated every aspect of the company's culture, creating an environment where employees were valued, respected, and empowered to reach their full potential. Mildred, now a seasoned CEO, looked back on her journey with a sense of both pride and humility. She remembered the early days, the frustration and disappointment of being dismissed because of her skin color, her anger at seeing her ideas stolen, and her determination to overcome all obstacles. She remembered the challenges she faced, the long hours she spent learning about finance, the strategic moves she made to outmaneuver Richard, and the alliances she formed with Sarah and Mr. Howard. And now, she could look at the transformed Innovate Tech and see that her dreams had come to fruition. The company had become a leader in the tech world, developing innovative products and services that were making a real difference in people's lives. Mildred had refocused Innovate Tech's mission from one that was strictly about profits to one that was focused on social responsibility. The company had become a major contributor to various charitable organizations, and they had been involved in several significant community projects, all of which had created positive change throughout society. Mildred received numerous awards and accolades, but she remained grounded, always remembering her humble beginnings. She understood that success was not just about power and wealth, but also about using her platform to uplift others. She was asked to speak at various conferences and events, but she made sure that she was never given special treatment, always requesting the same basic accommodations that she had received when she was just a cleaning lady. One day, she received an invitation to a prestigious awards ceremony, where she was to be honored for her work as a corporate leader and her contributions to society. But instead of accepting the award, Mildred decided to do something unexpected. She called a press conference announcing that she would be declining the award, and instead she would use the proceeds associated with that award to start a foundation that would help underprivileged people achieve their dreams. She announced her new program that would offer scholarships, mentorship programs, and funding for startup businesses. Mildred's reasoning was that if the world had been more open and honest, perhaps her journey would have been easier. She wanted to help create that space for others. She also wanted to make sure that everyone would be given the opportunity to prove themselves, no matter who they were or what their background was. "I understand that my journey is not unique," Mildred said in her speech, her voice echoing with compassion and empathy. "There are many people out there who have the same talent, the same drive, the same ambition that I have, but they have not been given the opportunity to showcase their talent simply because of their background. It is time that we tear down those barriers, and it is time that we recognize the true worth that each person has to offer." She then announced her new foundation, named the Rising Star Foundation, and she pledged to devote all of her time and energy to ensuring its success. She also announced her new initiative to mentor younger people, sharing her life experience and offering guidance to help them navigate their own paths to success. Mildred also decided to write a book about her life, chronicling her experiences and sharing the lessons that she had learned along the way. She titled it From Cleaning Lady to CEO, A Journey of Triumph and Transformation. The book became a national bestseller, inspiring people from all walks of life to pursue their dreams and to never give up, no matter what obstacles they faced. She went on a book tour, and she spoke at various places across the United States, inspiring the country with her stories of change and transformation. Mildred's story became an inspiration to everyone. She had become a symbol of hope, an example of how one person can change the world. Her actions were a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of integrity, and the necessity of compassion. She was an example of how people can change, how society can change, and that nothing is ever impossible. Mildred, looking back at everything that she had done, felt a sense of deep gratitude. She had gone from a humble cleaning lady to a powerful and influential CEO, and she had created a legacy that would live on for many years to come. Mildred, the cleaning lady who had been underestimated, had become the leader who had transformed an entire industry, proving that with determination and a heart full of passion, anything was truly possible. And there you have it, the story of Mildred Johnson, a true American original. Her journey from cleaning lady to CEO is a powerful reminder that anything is possible with hard work, determination, and a belief in yourself. We hope you enjoyed her story as much as we enjoyed bringing it to life. We're curious to know, where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this one. We love sharing stories that celebrate the human spirit and remind us that we all have the power to change the world. We're so glad that you joined us today, and we can't wait to see you in the next video.